YMCA.
Yeah.
No, they're on. They should.
Right. Yeah, that's working now. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Overview and Scrutiny Committee from the 14th of November. I nearly read out the summary. Welcome to the summary agenda, but that would be showing how tired I am today. Welcome, everybody. Just a reminder that this is a public meeting and it's being live streamed on the Council's YouTube channel. Let's start with item 1, declarations of interest. Are there any? I don't think we've had one this year, so that's either we're very boring or very appropriate, one or the other. Item 2, apologies for absence and any substitutes.
There's no apologies, Chairman.
Okay, wonderful. Item number 3, minutes of Overview and Scrutiny Committee meeting held on the 31st of October 2023. Has everyone had a chance to read through them? I read through them last week. I was pleased to see that the reference to the 2 things that I specifically wanted raising, which were the items to be added to the work programme, which I know Emma is aware of. So we're all happy to accept those. Any objections to doing so? Wonderful. Chairman's announcements, other than the fact that I've spoken with Emma about the 2 things that we felt wanted adding. I know Councillor Newstead raised some good points about the customer experience project programme, and that will need to come back more. And I've also spoken at Cabinet about that and about the need for that to come back. And I think they fully accept that that needs to come back, and a firm hold be held of that. So. And I welcome your comments on that, and I think that was what I needed that mentioning as well at Cabinet, that you had some good input into that. So, but nothing else really to announce other than that. And I think there's anything I should be made aware of. No, so I think I can give me a nudge and say, what about? Item number 5, public speaking.
There's no public speaking, Chairman.
Okay, we go straight to item number 6 then. Update of actions following from the Time and Task Limited Panel Housing Providers. Thank you. That's led by Mike. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. It's a natty title, isn't it? I'll have to think of something better. So the members, you've got the report in front of you. So we've had a good look at, since we came in last time, to review these actions and how we're going to work with housing providers. I have to say, our housing providers have been really positive, and it's been a really positive experience actually working with them. There's generally an interest in improving the way that we work together and improving for residents. We're all under extreme pressure at the moment in terms of accommodation and accommodation needs. So the feeling that actually Broadland Council wants to reach out and make a difference and work with providers is really positive. So just on the recommendations, you've got the report in front of you, just that recommendation 1, the antisocial behaviour element, just that the Social Housing Regulations Act is putting in place requirements for housing providers and district councils to work together around antisocial behaviour. We're looking to bring up a suitable service level agreement, which we'll present in due course when we've nailed the work down, just to really think about that more coordinated approach. And the coordinated approach is looking at tension has increased in our households, and we know that tension has increased in households but between households as well. So some of this is about how do we reduce and de-escalate that tension. What we don't want to do is just keep moving people, because all it's doing is exasperating the situation. So how can we try and remedy that, and what solutions can we put in place? So we're working on that with recommendation 1. You'll also note with the repairs commitment, we've got some clear aspects which Broadland Council are really pushing for in terms of keeping properties in good repair, maintaining that building safety, and respectful and helpful engagement as well. I think a lot of the issues that our housing standards enforcement team come across is actually not necessarily the repair itself, but it's the manner in which it's been dealt with, and the lack of feedback on when issues have been raised, and just that time scale. And really an understanding from housing providers about the about understanding from from the tenant point of view about what is needed at what time. So looking at that priority setting for tenants. So that's something that we'll be working on again, and you can see that our performance. So they've all agreed, all housing providers agreed to provide the performance as the new regulations. We'll get that performance in January as the initial set, so we'll be able to start benchmarking providers against each other and about the standards that we want to enforce as well. So that's a really positive step moving forward. Recommendation 2, looking at the data that we share, and that's why I should have introduced under one of our housing benefit managers here in case there's any technical questions. Actually, the information that we share with providers is quite is positive, and there's plenty of information to share. There are some learning points about the concern about oversharing and about some of our providers about asking for the right information. So we're going to look at a training course to make sure that housing providers and their staff have got the confidence to share information appropriately. One of the things that we know that there were a number of breaches in 2019, which has just made people nervous. But we've had ministers of state, we've had lots of people say, look, if you share information appropriately and proportionally, there is no concern at all. The problem is when you leave it on the train or you share it inappropriately, that's when breaches come up. So be appropriate, be proportionate, and then you won't have any problems. So there'll be a training course on that to ensure that our providers are supportive of that. But also this is largely about relationships as well. So when you know the people you're sharing information with, you can have that frank and robust conversation. That's going to improve a lot of the way that we share information about potential tenants. And we do have, and it's important that we recognise we do house offenders and we do house serious offenders. It's our duty as a housing provider and as a district council to do that. So there will be tension, there will be issues in our communities. So we need to ensure that we share that information appropriately to ensure that the housing provider, but also other agencies can make an informed decision about where the best place to place those tenants are. Just moving on then to recommendation 3. So you'll see that that's in Appendix 2 to scope out and move on for the future. So I would say that it's in a challenging time, recognising that the time it's taken to move forward with this, but actually it's moved forward in a really positive way, and we will continue to come in and update ONS on progress there, which is proven to be really useful. Thank you, Chairman, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mike. Have we got any questions? Jonathan.
Just with regards to the housing providers, we were talking about sort of like the register to sort of highlight where good practice is, perhaps. Are we finding that some of the companies where they get bigger, they obviously don't have as much involvement with us as such? As they get bigger, they get a bit little, we're going to do it our way and we're not really that bothered. And the smaller companies are the ones that we could then work with. Would we be looking to do that? So use the register to sort of say, yes, they're a better person to use, or are we sort of a little bit stuck with what we can do?
Thank you. In some ways we're a little bit stuffed because obviously the housing stock is a housing stock. Without a doubt, our smaller housing providers are more local and more. You can go straight to the boss, and it is easy. We've got. Our biggest one is Clarion, which is a national organisation. I have to say that the local managers from Clarion are really supportive of what we do, and I think that's and actually they also have a resilience that some of the smaller providers don't have. What they don't have is an understanding of Broadland, because their head office is in London, and they've got big country overview. So there are swings and roundabouts. Their cost per home is obviously cheaper because they've got more resilience, but they're not so local. But we can't. The housing stock that comes on our register is the housing stock that comes on. So there's a limited amount we can do. But certainly one of the issues that we do have in Broadland is an ageing housing stock, and the replacement programme will be better in a larger provider because they've got the resilience to do that than a smaller provider. But some of that is also down to which is what Appendix 2 about housing delivery plans for the future, because we've got to look at ageing stock. How do we replace homes? How do we do about that? That's going to be a big important factor in moving forward. And people and organisations like Clarion are much more attuned to that than than some of our smaller providers who are just accepting their lot.
Thank you, Caroline.
Well, we're done. Okay. Myself and Martin were both on the time and task panel for this, and I was very pleased to see how the housing associations want to communicate with us, and I think it's all for the best for the council. Communication is the key with us and the housing providers, and I think that's a very worthwhile report. Thank you, Mike.
Martin.
Stole my thunder. I was going to effectively echo that. I was really pleased to have been on the time and task panel. It was encouraging when we did actually meet with the housing providers and their engagement, and I think that they hadn't had that engagement with BDC before, and I think they were very pleased that it was going to be a two-way street, and we were looking at the various SLAs, and I'm pleased that we're linking the repair thing back to the agreed government one, because then it doesn't have to come back forward. So all in all, really pleased that this has come forward.
Thank you. I was just going to make the point, and I'm sure this will be done, and it probably comes in the round of what Emma might be talking about later, but it talked about having more data in January, and then you'll be able to benchmark that. Presumably that will be another opportunity for you to come back and feed that back into us about what that benchmarking shows.
I think, yes, Chairman, what we'll do is we'll bring that, it'll probably take a month or two to just analyse, but we'll bring it back in quarter 4. And but I think, and actually then to genuinely benchmark in a way where we bring some of our partners, housing providers with us on that occasion as well, because there's statistics and then there's a story behind statistics, and I think bringing scrutiny to life is about that story behind statistics. And so, yeah, really welcome that opportunity.
I was just going to say, Mike, maybe kind of April, May time, only because you've then had the time. If you're going to start collecting the data January time, we can get you some meaningful information behind that data, so that actually when you have the conversation, you've had a few months of that being in place, and then having the housing providers in probably gives you, as overview and scrutiny, a really kind of good and robust conversation backed up by data.
I'll bow down to your expertise, but yeah, so at some point in the new year.
Would anybody like to ask anything else or make any comments on this? No? Mark.
So I know you say we've got an ageing housing stock. How much of all the new build is actually going into the social housing programme at the minute?
I'm going to have to defer that, but I will answer that. But it'll be one of our housing strategy team. You don't know, just I don't know. No. But yeah, it's a useful question to ask, and I will circulate that.
Frank.
Thank you, Chairman. On that note, I think obviously I know there's a delivery problem in as much as nutrient neutrality. We know there'd be a lot more social housing available now, if we hadn't had a problem with nutrient neutrality, and obviously that's continuing, and we've not got any resolution in sight. So there's plenty of sites around where there'd be hundreds of houses being built, but we're not getting them. We're not looking to get them probably for any time soon. I mean, in Rackheath, we've got major developments which are just on hold, and they would deliver hundreds of extra homes, in the long term, not tomorrow. but obviously, when we're looking at delivery timescales, I think we've got to be sort of factor that in, because a lot of these houses just aren't being built at the moment. That's just a comment, really. Thank you.
Absolutely. We're in when I was on Taven Parish Council, the large-scale development of several hundred, if not 1,600, is that right, 1,400? Yeah, houses, that was a timescale, and I know that's been completely thrown out now, and that was being talked about. Well, okay. And I know there's further developments planned for my own ward in Horsford, which who knows when they will be done or if they will be done. So, yeah, we're but it's like how long's a piece of string thing, without a question at the moment. I think we should take the recommendations and we'll vote on the recommendations still, because I think it's nice to have that support. To note the actions taken by officers, review progress and comment on ongoing delivery. Although everybody happy with those recommendations, all raise your hands if that's so. Thank you very much, Steve, for your report and your hard work. Thank you. We now move on to item 7, the budget questions for Cabinet, with Rodney giving the report.
No, because it won't pick up on
The camera will aim at you, Mike, if he presses the button. Yeah, because it's set to there.
Come and be the
So
rose between
you'll look like some sort of ventriloquist dummy that you're, or the ventriloquist and not the dummy, but yeah, he would. Yeah, he would. They'll say he's not moving his mouth at all. He's so good.
Right, get my thoughts back in there. Right, thank you very much. So very much you recall that we had a informal budget scrutiny workshop on the 24th of October where members of this committee had the opportunity to meet with members, see some draft budget figures for next year and come up with some suggested comments and queries on the potential budget. So we're coming back to this formal meeting today to ask you to look at the draft questions that we pulled together following that meeting to see whether you wish to endorse these as they are or whether there are further changes you want to make to these questions before we submit them formally for Cabinet to respond to. Thank you.
Obviously, I don't want to take each question individually at a time, but obviously anything which people feel they want padding out or making clearer, this is our opportunity to do that. I mean, there are I think the assumption of the questions, or the range of the questions, the number of questions, covers all the sort of actions of the council, and there's a lot of work there for Cabinet members to answer. But before we start, the only thing I'm going to say is I note that item 13, and I emailed you about this, Rodney, before the minutes have been published, or the agenda had been published, so we didn't withdraw it as such. But you told me that 13 is in itself not possible to do, even if someone wanted to do it, which I don't believe there's any thirst for anybody at the council to want to go down this route anyway. But the government have precluded the idea of a 321 collection system by councils anywhere. Is that your understanding still?
That, excuse me, that is indeed correct. That is sort of response to the consultation about simpler recycling has very much ruled out the ability for councils to move to what's known as a 321 system of recycling. So you may wish to withdraw that question as a result or look to amend it in some way.
Vice Chairman.
Of course, yes. Is this by chance the one about comparing the figures to prior year numbers?
No, you answered that question for me, and I was deeply heartened by some of the information you gave me. Now, the question that you've overlooked was that of how does the council propose to have a balanced budget, not draw on reserves, and yet not withdraw any significant services, and yet not increase council tax?
Is that called the impossible?
No, I think it's perfectly possible. We've managed it before. I don't see why we can't manage it again. You have overlooked it, haven't you?
I mean, in theory, I mean, it's a magic one-type question, but it does give the whichever cabinet member is answering that the question, the opportunity to answer how and why it may have been done, and how and why it may or may not be able to be done. And I can't see any cabinet member would have a problem with answering the question either way, so I haven't got any issue with it. I know the cabinet members are keen to answer questions.
The only thing I'd point out is obviously the answer to that question will in many respects be the cabinet report that comes for approval in February, because this was very much the budget workshop that was looking at the draft proposals as it was. Actually, they'll listen to the comments and questions being formulated, and then we'll come back for the formal budget proposals, which will need to show a balanced budget proposal for next year, actually at that February meeting. But again, that's no reason why you can't still ask that question.
Thank you. Has anybody got any amendments or alterations or whether it's the wrong way of putting it, thickening out of any questions or redefining of any questions that they want to raise at this point? So, Fran.
Thank you. Yeah, just one thing. Obviously, we're asking a question around SIL here, which is largely irrelevant in many ways, because we keep 5% of SIL money for staffing here. So in a way, that's not going to change. But I do think what is important is the impact of the lack of SIL, going on from where we were talking before about nutrient neutrality. So obviously, there's a fall in income with SIL, which will impact upon some of the infrastructure projects in the greater Norwich area. That's not directly our budget, but it could impact upon our budget or our plans for the greater Norwich area, and particularly Broadland in this instance. But actually, I know when we had this meeting and when we were talking to different assistant directors, etc., and we spoke about planning, and at this moment in time, planning more or less pays for itself. Right now, that's on the basis that we've been building. Now we're not building at the moment. We're not building in Broadland. The SIL, obviously the SIL money's affected, but so are the fees that we collect. Now, if we're not giving planning permission and we're not building, then that will be impacted. And I think that is something significant that we need to really think about, because if we're not collecting, let's say, £250,000, for instance, which could be the case over the next year or so, then that will impact massively on the budget. So I do think we need to really flesh that out, and it's not really in any specific question. I've linked it to question 3, but I think it could be a standalone question, really. Yeah. Oops.
If you've got a wording you would like, I mean, there is, of course, the other question is, I mean, it won't necessarily impact on the council's budget, but of course, SIL money for a lot of parishes provides them a lot of opportunities to fund things that actually then the district council doesn't have to fund, because they're doing it. They say, we've got this SIL money, and in some cases they say we've got to spend this SIL money because they've got it and they know that it's time limited, really, that they need to spend it. So there is a question about how the council is managing that potential deficit in income and a greater call on its income. So I don't know whether you've got a particular wording. I don't want to write your question for you, but if you've got something you would like to propose for a question.
If the impact of nutrient neutrality, i.e. on lack of development, continues, how are we going to bridge the gap of the reduced fees that we will collect for development, essentially? Is that okay? Right.
James is doing his usual scribing as we go, and are we happy that we can include that as a question to everyone else? Adrian?
Yeah, I was in the workshop and Fran was at the same table as me. The assistant director of planning was asked that question, and she said, in regard to planning fees and the fees they receive for next year, given what is planned to go ahead and is going ahead, she didn't see there being any issue with being able to cover her budget. So I find this a bit of an odd question, because that's why we had the workshop, to ask assistant director those kind of questions. So I do see it as a long. So what the assistant director did say is a long-term issue. If we have a sustained period of no development where we can't get stuff done, it will cause problems. But for the next year, she didn't stress that as a concern. So I don't see why we should be asking that as a question, to be honest.
I mean, we have had a sustained period. It's been 18 months now since nutrient neutrality sort of kicked in and affected development or new planning applications being approved. Large applications are on hold. You've mentioned yourself, Taverham, obviously in Rackheath as well. Rackheath, they'd have spades in the ground by now, and probably in Taverham too. So I'm just saying that there are some major developments and some major incomes that are impacted. So I question the discussion that we had, and actually the long-term implications of that income. That's where I'm coming from. Thank you.
Just an opportunity, we've got a cabinet member here who wants to speak on this. So, Joan.
Thanks, Chair. No, you mentioned question 3. I mean, isn't it covered within question 3, in the sense that question 3 is asking if SIL receipts fall from the current level, what impact will this have on our budgets? And that's all budgets.
Emma wants to sort of clarify something.
I'm gonna find us a halfway house in a proposal. I think you're right, Councillor Davis. It follows through from the SIL question, but I think it's around the clarification underneath that. So I think, my computer's just gone. So where you've got question 3, I think it's a sub follow-on from that, in terms of an update position on where we are with the nutrient neutrality, how that's impacting on the planning applications, and how we will then fulfil the budget requirements for that service. I absolutely understand what Councillor Tipple is saying, and part of that is, yes, those informal discussions were held, but as an overview and scrutiny as well, you've got a role to kind of ask those questions in the public domain. So I think by adding that just as a subsection of clarification to question 3 then resolves that, and we can work that one through.
My understanding, when I've spoken to leader of the council, has been that she's very keen that we are as open and honest about the financial situation and the going forward of the council as possible. So I don't believe there's any issues or concerns about hiding anything in that respect, and I think as much light that is shone on the budget and potential in the future, I think, is important personally. So if that slight amendment can be taken, so essentially the question only has a tweak to it. Okay. Are there any other issues that people want to raise? Oh, sorry, Martin.
Thank you. Oh, sorry. Yeah, it was more around question 14 on page 22. Now, I know that Mike and his team did a lot of work with Richard, a lot of modelling previously, and I just wanted to try and expand a little bit on that question, because as much as, you know, it's great that we've got Harvard Court now and it's coming through, but now with the impacts of the long-term inflationary pressures and also the cost of living, and I know when speaking with Mike, there's a piece of work coming forward around the cost of living and the impact on there. So it's more just on that, is really fleshing that out, because again, we're not the only council who have seen the increase in pressure, and I just hate for us to be in a position where that is our major point of contention going forward in the future.
I think 14 gives cabinet member or whoever is going to answer the question the opportunity to really expand on that. I don't think it perhaps needs. I don't think there's any sense that this question has been written thinly enough that it doesn't give the opportunity to get an answer, because the answer will have to take into all those points into consideration. So I don't want to sort of go through and add a specific reference to one element of the question, because then it can sort of draw away from that whole broad brush. And I think a lot of the questions are quite broad brush to say, look, tell us about this, tell us about the pressures you've got within this area, without me wanting to dismiss what you're saying. I know you're saying for the best of reasons, but are you happy with my rather dismissive response? I don't mean it to sound that way. Thank you. With the changes we've noted so far, are we happy to go ahead with the points that have been made and go forward with these questions? It says here to ask a committee to agree to confirm the questions that the committee wished to push to the Cabinet in the joint budget meeting. Are we happy that we go forward with those questions? Do we take a vote on this? Because it's not really a vote as a voting issue type on here, isn't it?
No, if you're happy with it, the committee's chairman, are you happy with it?
Yeah. Okay, we'll go ahead with that then. Thank you. And of course, there's opportunities to follow up questions relating to these. So if someone doesn't come back with a very clear answer about that point, you can ask them to expand on that at the meeting itself. Vice Chairman.
It's a comment, really, if I may. When we come to the overview and scrutiny meeting to review the responses, I seem to recall in the past we had a fairly laborious process where the question was read out and the answer was read out. Can we find a more efficient way of dealing with it? Because the answers will be written beforehand. The questioner will have had a chance to review it. So my suggestion is that we just actually offer the opportunity to question in a little more detail without going through a fairly laborious process. Is that fair enough, Emma?
Yeah, so our reflections would probably be similar. So we will take the report as we take any other reports. You take the report as read and in front of you. You'll have the questions, you'll have the answers, and you'll have Cabinet in the room, and then you'll be able to delve through into more detail in some of those answers, because I'm sure they'll prompt further questions. So like with any report, we will take it as read, and then we'll talk around the answers that you have before you.
Yeah, we had that discussion a few weeks ago, didn't we? And this was coming up saying we wanted it to be very much let's expand on the answers rather than repeating the questions and answers. It's, yeah, it could be potentially incredibly boring and wasteful of our time without making it something beneficial to the council. Let's move to item number 8. Emma, Overview and Scrutiny Committee Work Programme.
So with that in mind, Chair, I'll take the report as read. Always. But I will just highlight a couple of bits. So without re-emphasising what you've already said, I will add in Customer Experience Project and the, I believe you asked for an annual review of the PSPO that went through as well. So I'll work with officers and get that timeline in. Your next meeting is the January meeting, where we will look at those questions in the way just described. And we've got, no, it's not you, Mike, is it? One of your team in around the health and wellbeing partnership. And then we've got an early intervention and social behaviour and business regulatory support up there. Those two, if you recall, pilot projects that we put forward. This is those coming back in. How have they done? What does the funding look like? And what does that look like going forward? I won't take all the other items on there. I will just flag some councillors. If you'd like some help with your topic reports, please let me know. So Councillor Emersall, I'm happy to work with you through on the car parking item you put forward. Councillor Bullman, likewise on Food Innovation Centre. Councillor Tipple, likewise on the award of contracts that you put forward. And then there's a couple of actions there for me, Chair, on other items just to work those through to further develop your work programme. But I will leave that there and happy to talk further.
Has anybody got any specific?
I think I've done.
Has anybody got any specific questions to Emma about the work programme? Okay, we'll take the item as read, and thank you, Emma, for that. I'm now closing the meeting after 34 minutes. Almost a new record.